So we're here at the launch site of the June 2023 BFL on High Rock Lake. And as you can see, the light is just starting to kind of break. However, we're going to be looking at a fog delay for this event. Now, the fog delay held us back about an hour, which really wasn't a big deal for me. Now, if you saw my practice video, you know that I wasn't really on any particular pattern or any decent fish. So I was basically performing a layup. My game plan was to start around the launch site of the tournament and just fish for retreads. There had been a BFL for another division the previous week, and I knew there'd be a lot of fish around this area. But I also knew that I would be sharing that water with a lot of other boaters. And with the lake waters being high and accessibility to certain creeks being almost impossible for most boaters, I knew that the lake would be fishing small. But stuck to my game plan, and we began the tournament fishing in the very cove that we launched from. So I started out my day fishing in this cove right near the launch, knowing that there's a bunch of retreads there, and having the experience to know that those fish are still in that area. Now, the previous day I'd gotten bit flipping some buckbrush just across from the ramp there, and that's where I started, and that's the pattern that I began my day with. The previous day I hadn't gotten any follows or, really anything on a moving bait. So, I decided that my best chance is just to flip. Now, as we kind of circumnavigated this cove, the only bite that my co-angler or I had was he had a small fish on a worm, bite his worm, but it did come on bite, and so he didn't capitalize on that bite. Now, one thing that was plaguing me on this particular day was just, my mechanical skills were just off. And, I was struggling to do little things like just accurately flip, and even tie knots was a chore. So, there are days where, it just, you gotta focus a little bit harder just to do the simplest task, and today was one of them for sure. Now, I really felt like the morning was going to provide me with the best opportunity to catch anything, and when I was not getting bit on flipping a creature bait, I quickly kind of moved over to throwing a finesse worm, and then from there actually even started throwing the wacky rig. And the reason I picked up the wacky rig so early in the day was because during my practice, right before I left, I decided on a whim, hey, I'm just going to throw a wacky rig around docks and see if I can pick up anything. And sure enough, on my very first cast in my practice, I did get bit on the wacky rig. So, I knew that hey, if these fish are if they're acting a little funky and they're suspended, that there's a good chance that wacky rig baton would produce some bites, and I wasn't wrong. Now, this style of fishing is certainly not my favorite. To me, throwing a weightless worm around is a little bit like watching paint dry. So I did mix it up. I flipped a power shot rig, which if you're not familiar with, you can check out one of my other videos. I show you how to rig one of those things up. And I did catch a short on that, but for the most part, I realized that, hey, these fish are suspended. I'm going to need to grind, and grind we did. That don't seem to have to work. I don't know how they manage, you know, but they fish every day. And they can afford a new boat every year. I still haven't figured out what they do for a living, but when I find out, I tell you what, I'm switching jobs. You gonna change over? Yeah. So at this point, it's getting a little later in the morning and the sun's coming up. So we decided to go ahead and start fishing some docks. And I ran into a stretch where I knew there were some brush piles and that sort of thing. And sadly, I did not connect with any, but my co-angler did skip a worm underneath the dock in the shallow section, and he ended up boating a real nice one. So that was definitely good for his points. I was psyched for him, and happy to see that one get into the live well. What's that? And that bite gave us some confidence to keep on fishing docks. And as we were going from one dock to the next, my co-angler ended up getting another bite. Dragging that shake. Now this one wasn't on the dock. He actually had just fan casted out into deeper water. Now this particular dock was kind of situated on a point, and I did know that there was, you know, some random structure out on this point. I reckon we should turn around. But for whatever reason, I just did not elect to throw any lures at that structure. But he did, and he was rewarded with a small fish that he was able to add to the live well. But that was a clue, and the light bulb went off. Now, rather than continue cycling through the baits that I've been cycling through all day at that point, I reached into my rod locker and I pulled out the Old Faithful Carolina rig, and I'm really glad I did.
Pretty good.
Yep.
He's sitting back.
So for those interested in my Carolina rig setup, if you notice, the bait is a little bit smaller than what a lot of guys throw on the Carolina rig. You know, most of the old timers, the old heads, will throw a lizard on a Carolina rig, and I was throwing the Riot baits, Vigilante and Green Pumpkin, and I just chartreuse dyed the tails, which is more of a confidence thing than anything else. Now, in this particular area, the water clarity was such that Green Pumpkin was sufficient. Now, if we were in dirtier water, I might have elected for, you know, a darker color, but Green Pumpkin's kind of, you know, one of those colors that's just a good all-around color no matter where you are in the country, and that Vigilante bait is definitely dynamite on the Carolina rig. So now, having assessed that there are fish offshore, we went ahead and bounced around to a couple different points. We were running out of time really quick, so, you know, we kind of stayed in the general area and checked out 2 or 3 points, but we did not have any bites in those areas. So we ended up kind of, you know, sampling those places and then running back to the original area where we got bit offshore, and you know, hoping that the fish reloaded. Now, sadly, I had an opportunity for fish number 5, and that fish came when I was reeling my Carolina rig in a decent sized bass, a keeper anyway. Followed my bait in all the way to the boat. Did you see him? But then saw the boat. That was another keeper. He just spooked as I was reeling it in. Ah, dude, that was number 5. Now, right then is when my alarm went off, and that alarm was to tell me, hey, you need to get your stuff together and prepare to get back to the ramp. But I decided to pick up a crankbait and just make, you know, a couple more casts, kind of a Hail Mary deal. And my co-angler ended up getting bit, and I ended up getting bit right around the same time. Unfortunately, both of our fish were white bass, and it did add for a little bit of, you know, last minute drama, I guess, if you will, which, you know, made it kind of fun. But yeah, that was it for the tournament. So we made our way back to the ramp, and everybody got home safe, and that was all she wrote. Oh, I thought I had one. Oh, I do. So that's all she wrote for the BFL on High Rock Lake. When I weighed in, I was right on that cut line for a check, but there were some bags that came in for sure. So yeah, I mean, I fell far from the marks that we wanted to get. So we didn't catch anything big, as you'll see in the footage, or as you saw in the footage. You know, my co-angler catching one kind of on an offshore point enticed me to pick up the Carolina rig, and the Carolina rig really saved my day. So I caught 2 more fish on it, which really helped my bag. And when I say bag, it was more like a small lunch bag rather than like a tournament bag, but it was a bag. So 4 fish, finished the day. I don't know, I bet you I'm somewhere in 30th place, roughly. Valuable points for the amount of effort that I put into practice. I think it's fine. You know, there was guys here that practiced all week and practiced last week for the Piedmont BFL. So the fact that I could come in and almost get a limit, you know, I can walk away with my head high. The one thing that I was really disappointed about was my mechanics during the tournament were really bad. It's been a while since I fished. It's actually been since my last tournament. So the last video you saw was the last time I fished. And yeah, my mechanics just weren't there. There's a few times where I really felt like a clown, just because I couldn't flip, I couldn't tie a knot. It just, nothing was going my way. But we kept our head down, we grinded. My co-angler was awesome, really good guy, Grant, from the Lake James area. He is a fabulous fisherman, and he kept his head down and he grinded, and he managed 2. Hopefully that's good for his points, and hopefully we'll see him at the super tournament, and then you know, I think he'll make regional final, no problem. So anyway, that's all she wrote, guys. We'll see you next time out on the water.